Only 1% of people who take creatine after the age of 50 know all the effects it causes in the body, and you are about to become part of that 1%. Creatine is no longer exclusive to gyms. In recent years, it has crossed the boundary of locker rooms and reached the shelves of people who are 50, 60, and 70 years old. It has never been consumed so widely in this age group. The problem is that, along with the increase in consumption, comes a flood of incomplete information. Much is said about the benefits and almost nothing about the effects that deserve attention. Anyone over 50 cannot make any decision about their own body based on half the story. That is why today you will see all the reactions that creatine truly causes in your body after the age of 50. We will start with the positive effects, but then we will address those that deserve attention. And rest assured, this video will not try to sell you anything at any point. What you will see is what science truly says. Before we begin, please tell us through the comments your name and the city from which you are watching our content. We would love to know. Effect number 1, improvement of brain health. One of the most surprising benefits of creatine, especially after the age of 50, is its protective effect on the brain. And when I tell this to people who have never heard of it, the reaction is always the same: total surprise. Because creatine in the minds of most people is still stuck to the image of dumbbells and protein powder. But science is showing a very different picture. The brain represents only 2% of body weight, but it consumes approximately 20% of all the energy the body produces. What many people do not know is that the brain also stores creatine and uses it intensively during cognitive tasks such as reasoning, memory, and decision-making. With aging, the brain's energy efficiency gradually decreases, and this decline is directly linked to age-related cognitive decline, that feeling that reasoning has become slower and memory is no longer the same. And do you know why this matters so much for those over 50? Because it is exactly at this stage that these signs begin to become noticeable in daily life. Recent research shows that creatine supplementation significantly improves working memory and processing speed in older adults. A study from the University of Sydney demonstrated that 6 weeks of supplementation improved recognition memory and reduced mental fatigue in adults over 45 years of age during prolonged cognitive tasks. There is also emerging evidence of neuroprotective properties, with studies in animal models suggesting protection against diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Although these studies are still in early stages with regard to humans, the mechanism makes sense. A brain with more energy available is a brain more resistant to cellular damage. For those in their 50s or older, this represents a completely new dimension of what creatine can do for the body. Effect number 2, reduction of the risk of falls. With aging, muscle weakness in the legs becomes one of the greatest risk factors for falls, and this is more serious than it may seem at first glance. A fall with a hip fracture, for example, is associated with an abrupt decline in quality of life, and in many cases, the beginning of a process of dependence on caregivers. In the United States, falls are the leading cause of fatal and non-fatal injuries in adults over 65 years of age. In Brazil, the situation is no different. What does creatine have to do with this? More than you might imagine. When combined with strength training, creatine especially strengthens the muscle groups of the lower body: quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, and calves. These are exactly the muscles most affected by sarcopenia, the progressive loss of muscle mass associated with aging, and they are also the muscles that ensure stability when walking, climbing stairs, and simply getting up from a chair without support. The improvement in muscle power and balance that creatine provides creates real and practical protection against everyday accidents. Regular practitioners of strength training who use creatine show better performance in static and dynamic balance tests compared to groups that train without supplementation. For people over 50, this can make the difference between a life with full autonomy and dependence on others for basic tasks. It is an underestimated benefit, rarely discussed on social media, but one that has a real impact on the lives of those who are aging. Effect number 3, support for cardiovascular health. This is an indirect benefit, but no less important for that reason. Greater lean muscle mass is directly associated with better cardiovascular health and lower overall mortality in older adults. This is not a small correlation, it is one of the most robust associations in the scientific literature on healthy aging. Since creatine combined with resistance exercise consistently increases lean body mass, it indirectly contributes to heart health. Studies conducted with patients with heart failure showed that creatine supplementation combined with aerobic exercise resulted in a significant reduction in systemic inflammatory markers, such as interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein. These substances signal low-grade chronic inflammation, a silent state that accelerates vascular aging and increases the risk of cardiac events. It is important to be clear, creatine is not a treatment treatment for heart disease, but its ability to improve body composition and attenuate chronic inflammatory processes can be a relevant protective factor within a healthy lifestyle. This is especially true for those in the 50 to 70 age range, a period during which cardiovascular health begins to be monitored more closely. Before we continue, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Having constant access to science-based information is what will make you progress with health over the long term in the world of exercise. Effect number 4, combating sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is perhaps the most silent and most devastating process of muscular aging. It begins around the age of 30, advances discreetly, and accelerates drastically after 50. The estimate is that we lose between 3 and 5% of muscle mass per decade, and that rate can double after 60. The practical result is a progressively weaker, slower body that is more vulnerable to injuries and falls. Creatine acts against sarcopenia in two complementary ways. The first is by directly increasing muscle protein synthesis. A study showed a 30% increase in the rate of protein synthesis in men over 55 years of age who supplemented with creatine. The second is by enhancing the effects of physical exercise, that is, making each training session more efficient in terms of muscular stimulus. In a study from the University of Oklahoma with men between 55 and 70 years of age, the group that took creatine gained an average of 3.2 kilograms of lean mass, compared to only 1.4 kilograms in the placebo group. And there is a detail that few people know. The effects of creatine are even more pronounced in older people, precisely because natural creatine levels in the muscles decrease with age. This means that those who need it most are those who benefit the most. Supplementation fills a real metabolic gap that aging itself creates. This makes creatine not just a sports performance supplement, but a legitimate health tool for those who are 50 years old or more. Effect number 5, improvement of bone and joint health. The health of the skeletal system is one of the greatest concerns for those who are aging, and with good reason. From the age of 40, a progressive loss of bone density begins that, if not combated, can culminate in osteoporosis and dramatically increase the risk of fractures. And in parallel, the joints also feel the weight of the years. Cartilage becomes thinner, joint lubrication decreases, and conditions such as osteoarthritis become more common. Creatine acts on this front in two ways. The first is directly on bone tissue. A study published in the Journal of Bone and Mineral Research showed that creatine stimulates the activity of osteoblasts, which are the cells responsible for bone formation. Participants over 50 years of age who supplemented for 12 months showed an increase of 1 to 2% in the lumbar spine bone mineral density. This may seem small, but it is significant when one considers that many adults in this age range lose between 0.5% and 1% of bone density per year without any intervention. The second form of action is indirect and works through muscular strengthening. Stronger muscles around the joints distribute mechanical load better during movements, reducing stress on cartilage and tendons. A study with adults between 45 and 65 years of age with mild knee osteoarthritis showed a 33% reduction in joint pain with creatine combined with resistance exercises. For those who live with discomfort in their knees or spine, this data is very encouraging. Effect number 6, improvement of muscle recovery after exercise. With aging, the time needed to recover from a workout increases considerably. Those who resumed physical activity after the age of 50 know exactly what I am talking about. 2 days after a more intense session, the soreness is still there. This prolonged recovery is one of the main reasons that older people space their workouts too far apart, reducing frequency and, with it, results. Creatine acts directly on this point. It improves resistance to fatigue and performance in high-intensity activities that depend on the creatine-phosphocreatine energy system, which is exactly the system most used during strength training. Muscles with a greater creatine reserve recover more quickly between sets and between training sessions. The muscle leaves each session less depleted and is able to reconstitute itself more efficiently. For people over 50, this accelerated recovery capacity is fundamental for training with greater frequency and consistency. Frequency is one of the most important factors for long-term results. With creatine, the recovery window shortens, and this has a multiplying effect on all the other benefits that exercise provides during aging. Now that you know the 6 positive effects, it is time to talk about what deserves attention. Effect number 1, initial weight gain from water retention. One of the first effects that creatine produces in the body is something that can surprise and even frighten those who begin supplementing: a relatively rapid weight gain in the first weeks of use. It is common to see people who, upon stepping on the scale after 10 or 15 days of supplementation, notice an increase of 1 to 2 kilograms and become concerned. The immediate question is always the same: did I gain weight? The short answer is no. What happens is that creatine promotes a process called intracellular hypervolemia, which in simple language means that it draws water into the muscle cells. muscles. This increase in water volume within the muscle is metabolically beneficial because it improves the cellular environment for protein synthesis and energy production. It is not fat, it is not inflammatory swelling, it is water inside the muscle, and this is something positive from a physiological standpoint. However, for adults with pre-existing heart or kidney problems, this accumulation of fluid needs to be monitored carefully. The heart and kidneys work together to regulate the body's fluid balance, and any condition that compromises this regulation can be aggravated by changes in body water volume. In addition, people who use diuretic medications may have the effectiveness of their medication altered, since creatine retains exactly what the diuretic is trying to eliminate. For this reason, informing your doctor about creatine use before starting supplementation is a step that should not be skipped, especially if there is already a clinical condition that affects the body's fluid balance. Effect number 2, drug interactions in older adults. This is the most critical point in this video and also the most frequently ignored. Creatine can interact with a number of medications widely used by people over 50 years of age, and this information rarely appears in discussions about supplementation on social media. We already know that creatine has multiple documented benefits in older adults, with potential application in the management of sarcopenia, osteoporosis, muscular fragility, and metabolic and neuromuscular disorders. But precisely because of this, when it is combined with pharmacological treatments for these same conditions, the possibility of interaction increases. Diuretics, blood pressure medications, chronically used anti-inflammatory drugs, and immunosuppressants are examples of medications that may have their effectiveness altered or that may potentiate renal stress when used in conjunction with creatine. The kidney is the central organ in this equation. It is responsible for filtering creatinine, which is the product of creatine degradation in the body. In people with already compromised kidney function, supplementation can temporarily increase serum creatinine levels, which may be misinterpreted in blood tests as a sign of kidney dysfunction. This does not mean that creatine damages the kidneys in healthy people. The scientific literature is clear in pointing out that in individuals without a history of kidney disease, supplementation within recommended doses is safe, but in people with pre-existing conditions, the scenario changes. Taking the complete list of medications in use to the doctor before starting any supplementation after the age of 50 is not excessive caution. It is simply intelligence. Effect number 3, gastrointestinal discomfort at high doses. Creatine is generally well tolerated, but the digestive system has its limits, and when those limits are exceeded, the signs appear quite clearly. Symptoms such as nausea, abdominal bloating, gas, and diarrhea are reported especially when creatine is consumed in high doses, such as during the so-called loading phase, which consists of taking 20 grams per day during the first 5 to 7 days of use, with the goal of more quickly saturating the muscle stores of creatine. Studies that evaluated the prevalence of gastrointestinal adverse effects found that these symptoms occur in approximately 4.9% of creatine users, compared to 4.3% in the placebo group. The difference is small, but it exists, and for those who are sensitive to the supplement, it can be quite uncomfortable. For adults over 50, whose digestive system may have greater sensitivity, the recommendation is straightforward. Skip the loading phase. It is not necessary. Starting with smaller doses between 3 and 5 grams per day, and maintaining this dose continuously produces the same muscle saturation effect over 3 to 4 weeks, without the gastrointestinal discomfort that high doses can cause. Taking creatine with a meal and plenty of water also helps to minimize these effects. A practical detail that many people ignore: low-quality products with impurities or inadequate granulometry tend to worsen these symptoms. Choosing monohydrate creatine from certified suppliers makes a real difference in digestive tolerance. Effect number 4, possible muscle cramps in poorly hydrated individuals. Cramps are one of the complaints most associated with creatine use in the popular imagination, and there is some scientific basis for this. Studies identified a prevalence of cramps and muscle soreness of 2.9% in the group that used creatine, compared to 0.9% in the placebo group. It is not something that affects the majority, but it is an effect that occurs in a real portion of users. The mechanism is relatively simple to understand. Since creatine redistributes water into the muscle cells, if the person does not compensate for this redistribution by increasing overall fluid intake, an electrolyte imbalance can occur in the surrounding tissues. This imbalance, especially involving sodium, potassium, potassium, and magnesium, creates a favorable environment for the occurrence of cramps, especially during or after physical exercise. For people over 50, this risk is amplified by an important physiological reason. With aging, the thirst mechanism becomes progressively less efficient. Older adults feel less thirst than they actually need to drink, and as a result, they tend to hydrate insufficiently without even realizing it. When creatine enters this scenario, the imbalance can be sufficient to trigger cramps, especially in the legs and calves, which are the muscle groups most affected. The good news is that this effect is entirely preventable. Increasing water intake when starting supplementation, maintaining at least 2 liters per day and more if physical exercise is practiced, resolves the problem in most cases. Do not wait until you feel thirsty to drink water. That is the most common and simplest mistake to correct. And just like creatine, another supplement that is very popular today among people over 50 is whey protein. So, if you want to discover the 8 mistakes you should never make when taking whey protein after the age of 50, we have a video appearing on the screen right now showing each of them in greater detail. Do not miss it. Thank you for watching until the end, and may God bless you, my friend.